If you or a friend has stopped playing Deep Rock Galactic recently, I don't blame you guys. In my last video, I ranted about like an hour's worth of pain points that have piled up and left players feeling frustrated. But Deep Rock's first ever maintenance update just dropped about a week ago, and it's obvious in this patch that the devs have not only taken recent player feedback to heart, but also acted on a lot of it. This update is a big step in the right direction for Deep Rock's future, and it feels like a return to form for a dev studio that's recently been bogged down by secret projects and the unrelenting grind to pump out seasonal content. It pushes the game much closer to a quote-unquote acceptable state to be sunsetted, which we now know is Deep Rock's inevitable fate due to the recent announcement that Ghost Ship's been working on a new game called Rogue Core, a part sequel, part spin-off, first-person co-op roguelike set in the DRG universe. Let's not get too far ahead of ourselves though. Now is as good a time as ever to jump back into Deep Rock Galactic. So here's the 10 most important things about the maintenance update that I wanted to shine a spotlight on. Let's start with the septic spreader. Here's me suggesting adding the ability to shoot down spreader projectiles in my season 4 critique video. Or shooting the goo while it's airborne should disrupt its trajectory so it lands straight below instead of continuing its arc. And here we are a few months later.
We've made it so that the spreader's acid globs are now vulnerable to projectiles in midair. In other words, the globs are now shoot-downable.
Recently, Mike from GSG confirmed that my idea in that video totally influenced their decision to implement this mechanic, and I'm not gonna lie, it feels kinda good to have some tangible positive impact on the game we all love. And it was cool to see this change take effect in literally my first mission post-patch, when my friend and I were swarmed with spreaders throughout a salvage mission. Oh, we can shoot these down now! Wait, let it shoot. Shoot, gamer. What? Oh, wow, that's kind of hard to shoot.
I mean, it's better counterplay than not having none.
Yeah. I also previously mentioned how it's strange that it took 3 NG platforms to cover the spreader goo to the point where it doesn't damage you anymore. Well, the goo hitbox has been reworked, so a single plat will now suffice. It's great that we have multiple counters to spreaders now, and overall, I'd say the septic spreader is in a pretty balanced spot. The stingtail, on the other hand, well, I'm not gonna lie, it got neutered. Previously, I stated that I saw 3 main issues with the stingtail. It was too lethal, too tanky, and too sneaky. And Ghost Ship actually addressed all 3 issues in this patch. Well, kinda. The stingtail's lethality was tuned down so that it waits longer now between grab attempts. For missed grabs, the cooldown was increased only slightly, maybe like a second or so. The bigger change is that if the stingtail does grab a player, it will wait 15 whole seconds before attempting another grab, and this is an eternity in game time. Seems like they got the message about how insane it was that the stingtail attacked 3 to 4 times faster than a Mactera grabber. The most notable change to the stingtail is that it's much squishier now. In my previous video, I felt that a 20 to 25% reduction in health would have been fair, but the stingtail was hit much heavier than that. First, its health scaling was changed to match grunts, in that the stingtail health does not scale up with player count anymore, like it did pre-patch. So in extreme cases like Has 5 with 4-player scaling, the stingtail's effective health dropped from 900 down to 480, a nearly 50% reduction. Furthermore, the stingtail now takes more damage from electric and explosive sources. Practically, what does this look like? Pre-patch, it would take 4 to 6 impact axes to kill a stingtail on Has 5 solo scaling, depending on where the axes hit. Now it only takes 3 regardless of aim, as long as they do hit. 2 charge shots with Scout's electric focus shots overclock is enough to kill a Has 5 stingtail if you wait out the DOT. You don't even have to aim anywhere specific. 1 minimum damage C4 thrown head on is now guaranteed to kill any stingtail on any Has level. Bruh. What? Are you serious? This is so dumb. I'm not mad about it. If you can get close enough to a stingtail to C4 it, like, more power to you, honestly. I'm sure there's some other interesting breakpoints for the new stingtail, but all you need to know is that it's much easier to take it out now. Finally, the stingtail was made more visible by getting its glowy bits brightened up a bit, or so the patch notes say. After comparing pre and post patch footage of the stingtail in dark environments, I can maybe barely tell the difference. It's quite subtle to my eyes at least, but considering how heavily the stingtail was nerfed in other aspects, the low visibility doesn't really feel as frustrating as it used to. But I don't know, I've talked to some other graybeards and they feel like the visibility change is quite significant, so let me know what you think. Altogether, I was a bit surprised to see how heavily the stingtail was nerfed. I'm actually not too mad about it, since Deep Rock is now in maintenance mode with dev time being split with Rogue Core, and I'd argue it's better overall for the stingtail to be left undertuned than overtuned if they can't touch it again for a few months. But maybe that's a hot take because I still very recently saw people spamming haha skill issue in the response to complaints about the pre-patch stingtail, as if those two words added anything remotely useful to the discourse. Alright, I'm getting off track. Moving on. With the new seasonal toggle, the big bad rockpox is mostly gone, if you've already lost your sanity grinding your battle pass to completion, that is. Once you claim the final tier 100 reward in season 4's battle pass, you're given the option to flip a switch and turn your game back into what Ghost Ship calls a season neutral state. If you choose to do so, it makes all rockpox content much rarer, and you'll come across it about as frequently as the rival bot content currently is in the game. This is pretty huge, and credit where credit is due, I commend Ghost Ship for implementing a feature like this. It takes a lot of humility for the devs to recognize and accept how unfun this content had become for a sizable portion of the community. And not only that, but for them to allow us to disable seasonal content that they've spent numerous months creating. In the patch notes, they state that they plan on keeping this season neutral toggle for all future seasons, which to me is good and bad for different reasons. It's good because it allows players to dig down and focus on the core gameplay loop that we all love, without the bloat, the distractions, and the frustrations of the seasonal content. But it's bad because I fear it sets the precedent for a low bar for future seasonal content, since, oh well, the players can always turn it off if they don't like it. Like, shouldn't the goal be to ship out seasonal content that enhances the game to the point where players don't even feel the urge to nuke it from their gameplay loop? Is this really too much to ask for? I know that at this point in time, we're only confirmed to get another season or two in the Deep Rock roadmap. It's hard to speculate about anything further than that, and I doubt even Ghost Ship themselves have thought that far ahead. But I hope the devs can pivot directions with future seasonal content. I've got some hopefully realistic ideas that I'll throw together in a future video, so hit the sub button if you want to be the first to see that. I also have mixed feelings about this seasonal toggle being locked behind the prerequisite of having to finish the battle pass first. What about the players who got frustrated by the rockpox to the point where they dropped the game entirely? This new feature doesn't do much to draw them back in. I think these players are gonna find roundabout ways to get what they want, which is avoiding the rockpox, even if it means they'd have to go out of their way to do so. Maybe by exclusively joining hosts that have the seasonal content disabled, or maybe downloading a sneaky mod that lets them remove the restriction and flip the toggle regardless of their battle pass status. And hey, if anyone asks, you definitely didn't hear about this mod from me. I don't know what you're talking about. Okay, seriously though, why not make the toggle available to all, with heavy disclaimers in the season pass terminal and the post-match screens, warning the players that fully finishing the pass is much harder if you have the stuff toggled off. Just give the players all the information so that they can make an educated decision for themselves instead of making the decision for them. I think that this would allow a lot of players to remain somewhere in the middle where they can keep the seasonal content, but if they get really unlucky in a certain play session where their assignments seem to be rolling all lithophage missions, they could hit the switch and get a break from the tedium of the rockpox without having to entirely quit the game for the day. I get it though. From Ghost Ship's point of view, the rockpox is content they've spent significant resources developing, so they don't want players bypassing this content entirely. That's why they've also focused on improving the rockpox experience itself. Here's what changed. Pre-patch, a single popped blister would fill up your meter significantly with 2 quick bursts, each filling your meter by about 35%. Now, popping a blister fills up your meter less than half of the pre-patch amount. You also have to be noticeably closer to the boil for it to affect your meter. In my shoddy testing, it went down from 3 meters to 2.5 meters. This isn't a huge change numerically, but if you actually plot it out as a circle, the post-patch infection area is only 69% the size of what it was pre-patch. Nice. Also, waiting out your rockpox meter to subside should feel better now, since it will start depleting sooner and quicker if you get out of the infected areas. And if your meter does fill up and incapacitate you, well, the left right button mashing isn't as bad now. It takes about 10 button presses to escape. Pre-patch, it was closer to about 15. If you want the nitty-gritty details, I'm sure you'd be interested in Lazy Maybe's breakdown of the maintenance update changes, which I'll be sure to link to. We also now have the option to bypass the button mashing entirely and let the game do it for us, with a brand new hold to break out game setting. If you're good at button mashing, this new option won't be as quick, but I'm sure this was intentional so players don't just default to it. Honestly, I was curious to see if a feature like this would ever make it into the game. I know what the devs say on their weekly streams isn't gospel, but they've mentioned in the past how adding something like this would trivialize the challenge, so they probably wouldn't go down that route. But things change, and it was probably one of the easier ways to reduce the frustration of button mashing instead of fully redesigning the challenge. The corruptor also got a bit of polish, and I'd like to think that my critique inspired the devs to improve the visual telegraphs of the stomp and the vine spike attacks. For the stomp attack, they added bright glowing particles to the edge of the damage zone, and I really like this change. It adds quite a bit of visibility to the attack, and you can see it in both well-lit and dark environments. The improvements to the vine attack were more subtle but still good. Now the corruptor will shoot out a tentacle that points in the direction that you can expect the vine spikes to appear. I worry this telegraph might be a bit subtle and blend in with the visual clutter of a real in-mission fight, but that's getting a bit nitpicky. They also improved what they called health bar damage feedback when hitting weak points, but I'm not sure if this was enough since in the maintenance update trailer, you can literally see the scout shoot focus shots into an already destroyed weak point. Look man, I don't want to roast Ghost Ship too hard in this video, but they're making it too easy for me. Like, come on. I'm supposed to watch this and not say anything? Real talk though, overall good changes to the rockpox and the corruptor. The update definitely didn't address all the pain points. For example, I still think the litho tool juggling is insanely tedious, but again, I think they did the best they could to address the main issues. Alright, let's talk about weapons for a bit. So the stubby got some love this patch, but I still feel like it's in a weird place. For example, this patch buffed the damage mods in tier 1 and 3, so they each add +3 damage to the gun. Previously, they added +2 damage each. As a result, taking both damage mods results in not only better DPS than if you had taken the ammo mods, but you also end up with more total damage. Off the top of my head, no other weapon is balanced this way. In Deep Rock, the whole point of taking an ammo mod over damage is to sacrifice DPS in favor of total damage, which in theory lets you go longer between resupplies. Another thing that's kind of baffling is the addition of an armor break mod in tier 4. I'm not really sure that this is what the stubby needed, since NG's breach cutter and shard diffractor are so good at stripping or bypassing armor entirely. Furthermore, this armor break mod slots into tier 4 where it competes with mods that straight up provide extra damage versus weak points or electrocuted enemies. I mean, if you want an NG primary with good armor break, why not just use the lock, which has an inherent 150% armor break value with no mod needed? I guess time and pick rates will tell whether Stubby's armor break mod is useful or not, but I was definitely scratching my head a bit when I was reading this part of the patch notes. Stubby's turret overclocks, EM discharge, and turret arc also got some buffs. I never really got into EM discharge because I didn't really like how it dealt tiny amounts of friendly fire. It wasn't really the actual damage to teammates that bothered me, but how each tap was essentially resetting the shield regeneration delay for my friends. So it's nice to see that EM discharge has been changed to now deal 0 friendly fire damage. I think I would give EM discharge much more of a fair shot if it worked like how it used to, where you could proc the effect on unbuilt turrets, allowing for much easier use on the go. Yes, I know there's a mod for this, but it's an approved mod and I just don't really feel like using that. As it currently is, I kind of feel like it just promotes a campy playstyle where you're babysitting your turrets, which I have to admit is incredibly strong and even scales up well into the modded difficulties. The playstyle just isn't really my cup of tea. Oh yeah, and turret arc also got buffed. The handful of turret arc enthusiasts rejoice. Let's instead talk about how the electrocution status effect was updated so that it now works more reliably on oppressors and dreadnoughts. Ignoring the fact how the trailer used taser bolts to demonstrate this change when taser bolts worked on them all along, I guess this is a good change. After more playtime and testing, we might see overclocks like electric focus shots or high voltage crossover jump up a few spots on tier lists, or even potentially become meta. Yeah, I know not everyone cares about this stuff. Use what you like and don't let anyone else tell you otherwise. If you do care though, why not come drop a follow on my Twitch channel where we can continue having these discussions. I've recently been hosting public Haz 5.5 lobbies with double enemies on stream, which has been equal parts scuffed and fun. Or just come hang out and enjoy the tunes, that's fine too. Link will be down in the description near the like button. Alright, moving right along to Gunner's coilgun, which got some surprise changes. The gun received a reworked tier 5A mod that now also grants bonus damage towards burning enemies. So we might see the emergence of a budget volatile bullets build, using the coilgun along with an overclock like the mole, which would provide huge single target burst damage, all the while allowing for a bit more flexibility compared to a volatile bullets bulldog build. Another single target option that seems intriguing is something like triple tech chambers built with the overcharger mod, both of which were buffed in the patch. I still think that the gun's recoil is a bit too strong to land triple tech's follow-up shots reliably if you're actually trying to snipe a weak point at range, so maybe the overclock could get an inherent recoil buff in the future. And if you've been using the coilgun for grunt clearing this whole time like me, don't worry, Hellfire post nerf is still arguably a best in slot overclock choice. Now that the overclock doesn't have a built-in radius buff, I've switched my tier 5 mod off of electricity and onto increased radius to retain the pre-nerf shot width. Losing electricity, and especially its slow kinda sucks, but it isn't really as bad as I thought it'd be, since the coilgun base shots do have a lingering DOT effect that can clear out packs of swarmers or shockers. I low-key thought this was an effect of the electricity mod, but I was under the wrong assumption this whole time. The electricity's slowdown does synergize really well with fear in tier 3 by essentially extending the fear duration, and I think it's still viable to take electricity with hellfire if you don't mind the minuscule shot width that makes igniting packs of grunts much harder. Overall, I'd say these were good changes to the coilgun. They seem to encourage players to branch out past hellfire without over nerfing that singular overclock. And as a heavy hellfire abuser when I play gunner in modded difficulties, I can rest easy. It's time to talk about weapon maintenance, a brand new progression system where you can earn new weapon paint jobs each season just by using your favorite weapons of choice. Here's a dumbed down version of how it works. You can pause if you want, but it's pretty self-explanatory. To start us out, Ghost Ship has provided 4 paint jobs to unlock, or basically 1 for each past season, and they've confirmed that we'll be getting an additional paint job for each future season. I love the addition of a system like this. It promotes weapon variety without forcing it, and this feels much more empowering compared to something like the RNG overclock reward system, which was also designed to promote class and weapon variety, but kind of failed at it, because most of the time you just ended up feeling punished when you didn't get an overclock for the class or weapon that you wanted. Earlier in the video, I mentioned that I hope Ghost Ship can pivot directions for future seasons, because recent seasonal content has felt rushed and it honestly hasn't had the warmest player reception. I think this new weapon maintenance feature is a great example of a new system that could be fleshed out in future seasons to further encourage weapon variety that would freshen up the gameplay loop. Maybe after you finish grinding all the mastery skins for all the weapons, you unlock something called true mastery status for the rest of the season. After this unlock, further kills would be tracked per gun, and you could show off this kill counter by attaching it to your weapons. They could even reuse the little screen from the decontaminator weapons for this display. This kill counter would be a nice reward for the gamers that choose to fully grind out all the weapons while also simultaneously introducing a new endgame mechanic. I think a system like this fits seamlessly into Deep Rock's existing game design philosophy. It's essentially combining 2 concepts that are already in the game. Number 1, an endless grind, which already exists in blue rank grinding, and number 2, tracking kills, which is already done per enemy type if you look in the Miner's Manual bestiary. Within the Ghost Ship team, I do believe there's interest in fleshing out these kinds of endgame systems. In Mike's recent interview with Axis Chronos, he mentioned that the team was exploring ways of implementing the Show More Promotion levels mod into the base game, so all players can continue to have something to grind for after the final Legendary 3 border. Hopefully we'll see more of this stuff in the future. I don't think I was the only one who was pleasantly surprised by the sheer size of this maintenance update. The Steam blog post preview and the video trailer definitely mentioned all the important stuff, but if you dig into the patch notes themselves, you'll find a huge list of small one-liners that feel just as significant. Here's some of my favorites. The mission type icons can now be used for equipment loadout slots, and this is a great quality of life change that just makes sense. And if you still feel that the loadout UI is a bit clunky, perhaps check out the Combined Presets mod, which lets you assign a name to each of your loadouts. The buggy hive guard behavior where it refuses to spawn in the sentinels was fixed. Now it'll force the spawns after a short delay. No more twiddling your thumbs waiting to be able to shoot bugs anymore. There was an attempted fix for the cave leech sound being too quiet. To my understanding, the core issue hasn't been fixed, and that's how the sound still emanates from the top of the cave leech in a spherical shape. This means that cave leeches located on the ceiling of a super high cave might still make barely any noise. I've recently discovered that there's a mod that might fix the core issue, but I'll actually need to put it into use to see if it's effective or not. I love this next one. If you mod Driller's satchel charges so that you can hold 3, grabbing a resupply now rounds up properly to give you 2 of them back. Before the patch, you'd only get 1 back per resupply, and to my knowledge, it was the only exception to the rule that resupplies round up for odd quantities of ammo. This is actually a pretty significant change. 3 satchel charges might become the optimal build since you can kit them to deal much more damage than 4 of them, while also getting back twice as many C4s per resupply compared to a max damage build with just 2 ammo. I think there's valid cases to build satchel charges with 2, 3, or 4 ammo now, which is a sign of good balancing. Next were a set of patch notes targeting the laser pointer and terrain scanner. It seems like they won't get stuck out or act wonky for clients, which is a welcome change. I'd love to see the client experience continue to improve in future maintenance updates, and there's even rumors that this update fixed long-standing issues like impact axe hit reg. So I tried playing 2 matches of Driller at 150 ping, and to my surprise all my axes did reg. So now my question is, why wasn't a huge quality of life fix like this mentioned in the patch notes? Like, dude, you did the work, time to take the credit, you know? Finally, it's not a certified DRG patch without some fun, obscure, but decidedly kinda OP tech getting hotfixed out of the game. This time, we pay respects to the wave cooker enthusiast among us, who can't tap fire the wave cooker anymore to minimize heat buildup. I'm sad to see this go, to be honest. Spam clicking the wave cooker also just made the gun sound funny, and that makes my driller brain happy. Alright, I gotta wrap up this section or else this video will go on forever. You can read the rest of the patch notes if you want the full scoop. Okay, it's time to stop talking about what's in the maintenance update and to take a step back and give Ghost Ship props for the update itself. Is it the perfect update? I mean, not really. I tried every possible way to test the gunk seed change, and I couldn't find a difference pre and post patch no matter how hard I looked. The patch gave us false hope that rocket barrage got buffed by enabling missile guidance, only for it to get hotfixed out within mere hours. People are reporting that machine events just straight up aren't spawning post patch, and wardens might be bugged as well. But I do think Ghost Ship did the best they could within their time and resource constraints. They saw the growing frustration with the rockpox and the stingtail, and did their best to address these issues as promptly as they could, considering that their attention is now split between Deep Rock and its successor Rogue Core. The quickest implementations for our pain points might not yield perfect solutions, but what's important is that this maintenance patch has provided reassurance that Ghost Ship still listens and cares about us. Yes, I know it's a bit ridiculous to be using this kind of language when talking about a video game dev studio, but I do believe Ghost Ship's commitment to its player base shines through in much of the game, and it's a big reason why many of us got hooked to this game and continue to stick around. As someone who started playing in Season 1, experienced 2 seasons of poorly balanced robots, then hear one of the higher-ups say on their anniversary stream, "Oh, we learned players didn't actually like 2 seasons of robots," only to see them repeat similar mistakes with back-to-back seasons of rockpox, I'm not gonna lie, it kind of felt like Ghost Ship was starting to get out of touch with their player base, doubling down on their creative decisions, community sentiment be damned. This maintenance update is Ghost Ship's way of showing, hey, we made some missteps, but we're listening and we're committed to improving. And on a recent dev stream, they even said that a main goal of this update was to prioritize the highest voted issues on the game's Please Fix site, where players can submit bug reports. I know sometimes it feels like shouting into the void when we as players give feedback, criticism, or suggestions about a game we love. But if you take Ghost Ship at face value, their commitment to transparency and open development is a breath of fresh air compared to the status quo. So the takeaway is, you can expect that I'll keep holding GSG accountable through a rant here and a video essay there. Alright, let's look forward a bit. I love the direction this update took, and I want to see Ghost Ship maintain this trajectory and continue to polish Deep Rock's roughest edges. Don't get me wrong, the last thing I want to do is come off as ungrateful here. We just got a nice update that addressed many of our qualms, and here I am immediately telling Ghost Ship, why don't you go do more? But if you look at the most recent roadmap, there is another maintenance update planned for March of next year. So it's fair to keep this dialogue going about how we'd like to see DRG continue to improve. And if you got some good ideas, feel free to drop them down in the comments and I'll try to heart some of the ones that catch my attention. Here, I'll leave you guys with an easy suggestion that everyone can get behind: improved game performance. I'd love to see Ghost Ship incorporate some of the performance improving mods into the base game by allowing players to limit enemy ragdolls or choose to play the game with reduced particles, for example. Sure, it might make the game feel less immersive, but some players are trying to squeeze out every last frame from their rigs, or maybe even their decade-old PS4. Yikes. An official implementation of these features will not only allow console players to get in on the benefits, but also open up this granularity to players who aren't comfortable with game modding. Ghost Ship could also replace the DLSS file currently bundled into the game with an updated version. Currently, Deep Rock includes DLSS 2.3.1, which is actually quite outdated. I've noticed that if I manually replace it with a newer version, I can get better visuals at a more aggressive upscaling ratio with even less shimmering. They could even potentially look into adding frame generation for those CPU bottleneck scenarios where things get hectic in high enemy density swarms. I know frame gen isn't the perfect solution for FPS games due to its added latency, but it's nice to provide it as an option and let the players decide whether they want to use it or not. It's also found in other games of the same genre, like Darktide for example. Aside from these band-aid fixes, I'm sure there's more Ghost Ship could do to continue to optimize the game under the hood. The devs have said that Rogue Core is essentially being built on top of Deep Rock's existing codebase, so I really do think that the time they spend optimizing performance would pay dividends in both games. But that's it for me. Now it's time to hear from you all. What are your first impressions of the maintenance update? Was it more than you expected or less? And did the update convince you or a friend to brush off the game and revisit it? Let's keep the dialogue going, because there's still plenty of things I want to talk about when it comes to this game. But that will have to wait for another time. And until then, take care.